Hello and welcome to blockchaingamer.biz and our weekly roundup. Make sure you check out all of our news on blockchaingamer.biz and follow us on Twitter at BCGBiz. Today is Friday, the 8th of September, and I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John.
Hello. Wearing a fine-looking hat today, Jenny?
I am, yes. I wore it last week as well, didn't I? But we never got a chance to talk about it.
We forgot.
We forgot, that's right. Okay. Wasn't going to phrase it quite that way. So is the Angry Dynomites Lab?
Angry Dynomites Labs, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, so based in Berlin, pretty small team. Co-founder Ollie was run a pretty successful mobile game studio. Him and some university friends, probably about 10 years ago actually. Now they founded a company that were doing idle mobile games. Pretty successful. Got bought by Ubisoft, and since then he's done a few other things. But he started the company looking at blockchain stuff probably about a year ago now. Yeah, just over a year ago. So they're building out this sort of very very sort of on-chain sort of focused sort of game where as a game people would go sort of maybe first impressions would go, where's the game, sort of that sort of game. But you sort of you have these they have the NFTs, they have these dinos. They've done two different. They've got water ones and fire ones out at the moment, and you sort of they produce these resources, fire and water, and then you can mix up the resources. You can mix fire and water and make steam, and it's a whole sort of complicated, not complicated, but sort of complicated-ish bottom-up sort of thing where you're making these materials, and then you use those materials to make blueprints. And the whole point of a lot of it is it's very collaborative. So no one player will have enough resources to sort of do everything they want, and a lot of the missions are designed to be collaborative, so you need dozens of people to sort of build these things.
Would you say that genre of games work particularly well for sort of fully on-chain?
I mean it's the whole sort of thing we've discussed in the past a little bit, that fully on-chain games, I think, for me, it's sort of the purest form of blockchain game, because just everything's on chain. There's no arguing about it. It's but there's obviously you don't want to make a fully on-chain first-person shooter. I mean, those two things are not compatible. So if you're making a fully on-chain game, you sort of the game genres you can do are sort of at least at this stage a bit more limited. But that's not to say you can't do really interesting stuff. It's just I think those games are much harder to do. They're much harder to sort of work out where the game is and how people are going to play it. But I think in the long run, that's I think where the super interesting stuff comes from. But we're not. That was a long introduction to your hat. And I should say that hat was actually was a giveaway, and you basically earn an NFT, and then you had to burn the NFT to get the hat. So it was very blockchain to get that hat as well. I also got a pair of.
You get the credit for that, John. That's all down to you.
Yeah.
I should say early.
Should say I've also got a pair of Angry Dino socks, but we're not showing those today. So.
No, thanks for not making me wear those. Right. So let's get into the news this week, and I wanted to start off on a sort of encouraging note of looking at the most popular blockchain games. You've been looking at the data, and you were positively surprised. That's the right way of phrasing it, no?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've not looked at it for a few months because I've been super busy, and it doesn't look like much has been happening really. But finally got around to looking at it, and almost for the headline sort of thing is almost like not good news, I suppose. That there's two games that for the last really couple of years have been the most popular by a long shot. So Alien Worlds, again another fully on-chain sort of where's the game sort of game, and Splinterlands, the trading card game. And it was about over a year ago now, about a year ago, Splinterlands had this big fall off in daily activity when it changed its reward model.
Yeah. You also did some clearing out bots, didn't
Well, that was they changed their reward model, and that meant it wasn't economic for the bots to be operating. And obviously in sort of crypto bear markets where you're basically earning NFTs and tokens, if the token price goes down a lot, then there's no sort of point collecting those. It's not so lucrative to collect those, so bots go and do other things. So Splinterlands over the last year's had a big drop, like 50%. But Alien Worlds have been about 200,000 daily active unique wallets, really for since it launched. Certainly for sort of 2.5 years. But it started dropping off as well. So I did sort of reach out to them, and it seems like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. So there is. It's interesting actually for the on-chain stuff. So one of the things about Alien Worlds is a very on-chain game. You start off mining these tokens, have some NFTs as well. But basically, you have these, I think, 6 planets, and those 6 planets are effectively DAOs. So they are players of the game. Also become sort of the governance model is you sort of become, I can't remember the exact term, but you become like the board of that planet, and that planet has a certain amount of tokens, in-game tokens attached to it, and a percentage of that, a small percentage at the moment, you can use to do things. So some of these planets are just giving them out as more reward to their people who are mining on their planet, and some of them are doing other things. And one of the planets is actually running an anti-bot campaign. So they're this is not the developer of the game. This is like people playing the game are basically trying to find bots, and get rid of them. So that's one thing that is happening. But the other thing is they've changed the way you mine. So there's now a bit actually like Splinterland's reward model. So they have these rarity pools now in Alien Worlds, and the rarity is based on the NFTs you're using. And obviously the point is to put more rewards towards the more expensive rare NFTs. Okay. So that again has sort of reduced the sort of the low-hanging fruit for bots that can just come in with very cheap NFTs and sort of mine out tokens. Again, the Alien Worlds token is an all-time low. So there's a few factors going on there. So it's sort of one of these things where, is that good news or bad news? In some ways you can look at the figures and go, oh, it's terrible. These 2 games have lost like half their audience or whatever. But when you look at it, actually they've lost bots, and we always knew there were a lot of bots in those sort of on-chain games, or there's potential for a lot of bots in those on-chain games. So is it bad that those bots have gone? Well, we'll probably not in the long term. So that was sort of at least interesting, if not sort of good or bad. But then there's some sort of lower level games. So those games have sort of hundreds of thousands of players, wallets every day. And then there's a whole bunch of games with like tens of thousands. So there's Upland, which has been banging out 20,000 daily active unique wallets for years. It doesn't go up or down, which again, you can argue is that good or bad. So that's the same. But we've had Planetarium's 9 Chronicles, which has actually been putting on a bit of a growth spurt.
Fully on-chain as well, to say.
Yes, that is fully on chain. Yes, it's slightly confusing that it is their own chain. So they have a sort of slightly weird philosophy. Well, no, maybe not that weird, but they sort of run their own blockchain, which comes with its own strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, so that's been doing okay. That's up to about I think 25,000-30,000. Axie Infinity has sort of picked up, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. I'm going to talk a bit about some of that stuff later on. But they're up. I mean, very small. They're up to about 15,000 daily active unique wallets. But that's up sort of 50% sort of over the last sort of 6 weeks. And then there's this interesting game called Untitled Platformer, which is a very simple sort of what they could, like a one-session platform, 2D platformer game where you just, it's obviously like a dungeon-based game, but you move left and right and jump up.
I had a go at it a while back, and I just couldn't manage the jump function feature.
No,
really,
it is
quite sort of, a bit. Early mode, I would say.
Well, it's browser-based. But probably, and you can get it on Android as well. But probably it's easier with a keyboard, I think, than I found it quite hard with a touchscreen. And it is one of those games that is sort of designed to be hard. I mean, that's sort of the point of it. And we'll see how they get on. But they've got up to like 30,000 daily active unique wallets. It's a new game, so there's obviously a bit of interest in it. Always a new game, and it's you don't need to create a wallet or anything to play. It's using the Scale network, which is a Ethereum L2, which has actually been around for a long time before Arbitrum and those sort of things. So I think it's getting a lot of sort of Scalar obviously pushing it as well. So we'll sort of see. I think it's always interesting to see new products come in and do well. 30,000 players a day, wallets a day, clearly is not 3 million wallets, 3 million players a day like Axie had back in the heyday.
No, but I think on a positive note, things aren't going down. Things don't keep going down.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I sort of having looked at this data for many years, I try not to. I over time I've found it sort of less significant. I think it's always interesting to look at, but I think it's less significant than maybe I sort of initially thought. Because you have to sort of think about what type of game is it and how much on-chain stuff is there. What obviously. Yeah. A game on Wax is going to do a lot more transactions because it's pretty much cheap, very cheap compared to even Polygon or Ethereum. So you have to sort of be a little bit careful what you're looking at. So it is an interesting data point, but it has to be used in conjunction with other data.
one thing that struck me is kind of I'm just missing one game on there. I don't
Yeah.
know, but with my impression, I would think that NFL Rivals would make that list really, because it's clearly one of the more popular games out there. So how come they're not on the list?
Yeah, so the data comes and always has come from DatRadar, where I used to work many years, or quite many years ago now. So DatRadar basically looks at smart contracts and sort of pulls the data from there. But it covers a lot of stuff, and it's sort of while the people at DatRadar, as far as when I was there, they would, if they were sort of big games, they would sort of manually look at those and sort of check that they were sort of covering what was going on. But with some of these games, it's quite, they might have dozens of smart contracts. Obviously, last year there was this big fuss about how many users Decentraland had, and people were writing articles based on DatRadar's data that said, Decentraland's worth $1 billion and it's got 8 users or something. And then Decentraland said, well, DatRadar's not looking at most of our contracts, and DatRadar was like, well, okay, I didn't know you had 100 contracts. So there is that little bit of, basically it's sort of a little bit up to the developer of a game to put the right contracts on DatRadar.
Okay.
But in terms of NFL Rivals, that runs on the Mythical blockchain, or the Mythos blockchain, however you want to call that. And at the moment, it doesn't look like DatRadar's even covering that at all. So, if they're
Blanco's not on there either, then I assume.
well, Blancos runs on a permission blockchain, so you can't even look at that data. I think that data's not even open. So. So DatRadar is sort of good. Again, when it comes back to this on-chain data, DatRadar is sort of good for a lot of stuff. But for new blockchains, it may not even cover them, and for other sort of newer games, it may not cover, the right smart contracts. I mean, you can look at quite a few of those sort of games, and it'll say, I can't remember, there's one I was looking at the other day, and it said it had one user, and obviously it's just looking at it's not looking at the, and it also depends a little bit.
For B&B games, Polygon and Ethereum, they'll be on
there. Yeah. But just as a sort of counterpoint, so Crypto Slam, which is a sort of similar data sort of platform website, which looks at NFT sales, doesn't look at it just looks at the sale of sort of marketplace type stuff. So they do cover the Mythos blockchain. So looking at it now, we can see in the last 30 days, there's been almost $300,000 worth of trading of NFL Rivals NFTs. There have been about 2,000 wallets selling, about 3,500 wallets buying, and in total there are 42,260 wallets that own NFT Rival NFTs. So I think you're sort of right. If we did have data for NFL Rivals, given that we know it's done over 2 million downloads and it has 40,000 wallets in the so I would sort of think, given that it has quite a good cadence for getting you in there every day and playing, because that's although like, again, we have to be careful that the on-chain bit here would be how many people are buying or trading NFTs every day. So that'd be different. If you were looking at how many people are playing the game, obviously you're in hundreds of thousands of daily active users, I think, on that game.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of, you have to be sort of careful what you're comparing.
Cool. And kind of the breaking news earlier in the week was the Gala Games. The kind of the suing, the co-founders are suing each other, and it's quite messy. So I don't think we'll go completely into detail on that one, but can you tell us a little bit what's been going on there?
Yeah. It's
in 1 minute, John. No.
It is in a minute, yeah. So I mean, I've always been broadly ambivalent to Gala Games. I've sort of covered it. I've played some of the games and stuff, because you never sort of know. And as I pointed out, previously, it was the highest performing cryptocurrency in 2021, I think. More than not just of games, of anything. It was but it sort of now transpires that the two founders, one of them was a games guy who's a co-founder at Zynga, and one of them was alleged total fraudster who basically made his money by doing multi-level marketing. So we see a bit of a reason why maybe that in that market they did so well. But basically the two co-founders are suing each other, and pretty much everything that Gala has been doing in terms of reissuing tokens and burning tokens has basically been one co-founder trying to stop the other co-founder cashing in tokens, which he says the other co-founder has stolen. So it's just horribly messy, and it's obviously bad for. I think there are some decent teams who are making games for Gala Games, and obviously they employ hundreds of people, and that it's not it's not those employees' fault.
Them, is it?
But basically, as it's sort of laughable in the sense that these are you would think fairly sophisticated people, but they set up a company with two co-founders, 50% each. So it seems to be the shareholding. Although there always was rumours that there was a third person, but that's not in the court. The court filings say 50% between these two people. But they set up a board that said any decision had to have 2/3 majority. But there's only two of them. So I mean, maybe there were three of them, and then one of them sort of got bought out really early. And
it must be. I mean, it just nothing else makes sense, really.
No.
I just can't believe that they are.
But even in that case, it's sort of I mean, it just seemed weird that those are sophisticated people who Zynga sold. Zynga did an IPO for $1 billion. It's kind of weird that a person like that wouldn't have clearly have access to lawyers who you would go, well, let's set up something, and you get get some of your mates on as non-exec directors and have a proper board. And they never did any funding, any VC funding or anything. So it's all sort of bootstrapped. So I guess it boils down to one of these incredible sort of stories that people like writing about in the crypto space, which unfortunately happen a lot, but I don't think they're reflective of the broader professionalism of what most blockchain games people are doing.
I guess any industry, I mean, we can just look at anything, and I'm not going to go into too much into detail, but like looking at politics or whatever, any sort of area where people can gain lots of status or lots of money, they are going to attract a certain amount of the wrong sorts of people, aren't they? And they're not going to give that industry a good reputation then. But I mean, there are plenty of good politicians out there, as there are plenty of good people in the crypto space and game developers and publishers. I mean,
you're even seeing it now in sort of AI and some of the big AI sort of companies. There's one in the UK, I think it's a Stable Diffusion. There've been lots of FUD around the sort of fairly young CEO there, and whether was it all his work, and how does he run his company, and blah blah blah. Exactly what do they own as the IP? Do they have access? What exactly do they own? Where do they get that data set from? The algorithms? So I think it's sort of, as you say, this is not. I mean, there's a particular nuance with crypto that you're sort of inventing your own money, which is sort of more direct way of sort of scamming people. But we're going to have the same thing in AI, where basically if you're so many AI companies out there trying to raise a ton of money on massive valuations, and it's almost impossible unless you look at unless you're an incredibly smart AI programmer who looks at their code base, and even then, you might not have much of a clue about what's going on there. So it's just
Okay, moving on to Axie and what has been going on there with the Axie Infinity Homeland. They've added some new rewards, Axie rewards, and you can earn those on a weekly basis now. And can you tell us a bit more? You're a landowner, right? So you are actually affected.
Yeah, so this is good actually. So Axie Infinity Homeland has been live probably for about a year-ish. You have to have a Axie Land NFT to play it. So this is Homeland is sort of the land. It's sort of it's being built in iterative steps, but the goal is that sort of the long-term sort of MMO sort of RPG bit of Axie, where the Axie game, this card battling game, sort of to a degree sort of declines in importance. I guess it's always been an important sort of product for Axie, but there's a bigger world going on here that the battler is sort of part of. Homeland is a pretty much like some sort of traditional sort of farming simulator game where you're building buildings, you're collecting resources, sort of wood and stone to begin with, and then you're building some buildings, then you're planting crops, and then you'll have using those stuff like wheat and rice and potatoes, and you're making more complicated foods. And then you're leveling everything up, and then you're sort of building. You can do the sort of mining, and then you can craft elements. So all that sort of stuff's going on, and then there's these sort of battles that you're not doing. Sort of these people are coming. These travelers are sort of coming to you, and you can sell them like food and the the crafting stuff you've been making, and then they go off and do battles, and there's a whole obviously infrastructure between you can sell if you have wood and stone and potatoes and stuff, or crafted stuff you don't want, you can sell that to a marketplace, so you're selling to other players. So taking them a bit of time to get going on that, and they keep resetting it. So it hasn't been very stable. It's a PC build, hasn't been very stable in the past. It's now stable, so that's good. And they kept resetting the seasons, which was annoying because you'd sort of get to a certain stage and then they reset it all. So I didn't play it very much.
They removed the seasons, haven't they?
Seasons have gone now, yeah. And the most important thing, I guess, now is they've always, for over a year now, they've had a staking program for land. So you can stake your land into a smart contract, and you basically got every day you got a certain number of AXS tokens, the governance tokens. So that was sort of fixed. And so what they've done is they've now taken 20% of that pool of tokens that was allocated to that, and they've put them into the game. So instead of just passively staking your... So over time, what they're going to do is the passive staking, I think, will sort of decline or maybe go away, because what they want landowners to be doing stuff. They want landowners to be doing useful stuff in the game. And so those tokens are now being distributed to people playing Homeland. It's not happened yet. They're going to do it every week. It's sort of quite a manual process. But basically, the more activity you do in the game, the more of these sort of in-game sort of tokens that you earn, and then they're somehow, you get the allocation. You get a percentage of the allocation depending on how many of the in-game tokens percentage you've earned. So we'll wait to see how that plays out. But it's as a retention mechanic, I think it's pretty good.
So a couple of months back, Homeland did this update where landowners could delegate their land to other players. Have you done that too?
No, I haven't done that because you can't do that with staked land. So you had to unstake your land to do that. So there wasn't much point of there was no economic point of doing that, because at that point you couldn't earn anything in giving in the game. So now obviously what they're doing is that they're moving it over, so it will make more sense for people to delegate their land. I mean, I've only got 2 lands, so there's no but I can imagine people with dozens of land that it would almost be. I mean, I think when you get over about 4 lands, it would almost be impossible for an individual to play that effectively. So you just sort of have to have a sort of scholarship system, and that'll be interesting again, because that will be Axie is known for inventing the scholarship system as much as anyone was. So that'll be good for guilds who have land. So I think the thing with Axie at the moment is everyone expects it. I mean, everyone thinks it's dead. Everyone outside of the space thinks it's laughable, and that was a Ponzi scheme and that's dead. But within the space, it's sort of they're building a lot of stuff. Some of it will work, some of it won't work, but it's a very slow process to sort of get to where they want to be, really. So. But we expect over the next sort of year I would expect to see sort of usage on Axie stuff sort of steadily increasing. Though I don't think there'll be any big booms or anything.
Good. And they'll integrate their Axies into the sort of with the other games that are coming on Ronin as well. Aren't they? The which was the recent game announced, Wild Forest, which you can play the alpha if you have Mystic Axie or an Axie?
But that's a totally separate game. That doesn't. I mean, that's always the thing with Ronin.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, but they're. I mean, in terms of their ecosystem.
I mean, that's the sort of the big unknown for Sky Mavis. I think over the next year is they've got Ronin as a blockchain. They've got all this Axie stuff going on. Everyone knows Axie. That's fine. That will that's a sort of known quantity. I think. That's just a sort of a building and then marketing proposal. But obviously what they've also got is they've potentially got, a lot of wallet holders and a decent amount of sort of value in that system. And those people presumably want to play games because that's why presumably they played Axie. Obviously they played it to make money as well. But so can they put in games that have nothing to do with Axie and have some of those games being successful, on the Ronin blockchain? So they've got 6 games announced so far. I mean, a sort of quite a wide mixture of games, from like sort of top-down MOBA shooters to this Wild Forest that you mentioned, which is a more like a sort of strategy game, isn't it? Which has nothing to do with Axie at all. But obviously you're gonna need a Ronin wallet to play it, and I'm sure there'll be sort of incentives for people to play those if they're on Ronin. But I think some of those games are interesting. I think there'll be obviously more games coming. I just don't know whether how that Axie audience, what sort of games the Axie audience is also going to like. Maybe they just love all sorts of games, but maybe sort of the Ronin
Maybe
chain.
they want a different audience to onboard the ecosystem. I know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that if you have I mean, it's always a little bit chicken and egg. If you're not going to have a really big hit game on Ronin without the Ronin. I don't think you're just going to, the Ronin community are going to say, we don't like this game, and all these other people are going to pile in to Ronin for that game. And possibly could happen, but I think that's less unlikely. That's less likely. So I think the stuff that will work best is stuff that sort of appeals to the existing Axie audience, but it's different enough. You don't just want to do like, oh, we're sort of doing a version of Axie, but with, I don't know, elephants or something. I mean, it needs to be a different. So that's what they're trying to work out. I mean, none of those games are live yet. None of those sort of third-party games are live, so we have to sort of wait and see when it happens.
Okay, moving on. Sugartown. They have revealed, well, Zynga's game platform, Sugartown. They've revealed some mint details, and they were not exactly what you had expected, I think. what did they reveal?
Yeah, so I mean, it's good that Sugartown is still going. I think a lot of people thought that. I mean, I thought it's probably Zynga had sort of given up on the Web3 stuff. They've been very quiet about it, but sort of did an announcement middle of August. So Sugartown is more like a sort of a platform, really, a sort of gaming sort of platform. I think it's been more like mini games in there rather than Sugartown being a game. That's the impression I get. And yeah, so they're doing this mint of their sort of in-game characters called what are they called? Auras.
Aura.
So they're doing 6,000 on a free mint on Ethereum next week, and they're doing it through an allow list. All that is absolutely sort of standard. The weird thing is, normally people say Americans can't, because of the laws in America at the moment, and Zynga is part of Take-Two, which is a public company. You would expect them to say, American citizens can't get involved in this sort of stuff. And in fact, they say the exact opposite. So the only people who can mint are US citizens, and then a whole bunch of Southeast Asian countries: Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand. I think off the top of my head. Anyway, so it's quite a weird selection. Not weird in the sense that obviously those Southeast Asian countries are the people who really love Axie Infinity. So we know there's a lot of crypto blockchain sort of players there. So that makes sense. But they are not. I mean, those are not high revenue territories. And then the US, obviously they're a US company, so I guess that's why they're going for the US. So obviously if those are the restrictions, then people have to prove those restrictions. So I mean, I don't fit into that, so I can't go through the KYC process. But effectively, they're doing a KYC process where you have to prove you're over 18 and you're a citizen of one of those countries. They're using the Forte platform. So that is a compliant sort of KYC platform anyway. So that's they can do that through that. But it's I mean, as you'd expect, there's been sort of quite a lot of disquiet. I don't think Zynga and this Sugartown project are they're not like a Wreak League. They're not like wow, a lot of crypto sort of bros are just like, this is going to be really cool because it's a Wreak League being a massive sort of building mechs and smashing into people and a fighting game and Yuga Labs and that's just I think exciting for a certain type of person where all the artwork about Sugartown is a little bit odd. I mean, a little bit different to crypto stuff, which is good or bad. Obviously, they've made that decision, and then having all this KYC stuff is sort of, for a lot of the crypto people, just like, well, I'm not doing KYC for these sort of weird NFTs. So it'll be interesting to see if the fact that Zynga is a big company is sort of enough. Obviously, it's a free mint, so you'd be sort of surprised if they can't sell a free mint out. But basically, they need to find 10,000 or 6,000 people who are going to go through a KYC process. I mean, they should be able to do that, you would think. But then once the things are minted, that'll be the first thing. Can they mint it out? I assume they probably should be able to do that. But then what's the price of these things once they're out? Because
that basically work as a game pass. Or...
No, they are actually. I mean, they will give you early access, but they are actually in-game assets in the sense that you stake them and they earn you energy to play the game. So
right, okay.
So they're not just sort of PFPs. They are actual sort of in-game assets. That, I mean, they're not maybe they're not direct. You don't use those in the game, but they have a direct sort of mechanic in the game. So that'll be the interesting thing when people have got these things and can sell them on. What prices are they going at? And I sort of think it's hard to see I would sort of think like $50 is sort of that sort of sweet, $50 to $100 is sort of the sweet spot. Whereas I think if Zynga had done a different sort of project and done a different sort of mint, you could imagine it more like $500. I mean, even in the bear market, I mean, it's Zynga. It's they're the first US public limited company to do this sort of stuff. So anyway, I think maybe they're doing it. It's more an experiment. They don't want to get everyone heated up. They just want to, very experimental. Blah blah blah. That would seem to make more sense. But I've not spoken to them, so that'd be conjecture.
You've also been talking of Wreak League. You've been talking to Gala Games CEO Tyun Kim this week about that game, Wreak League. And can you tell us a bit? I mean, that requires KYC, I thought, didn't it? As well?
No, it required KYC for the let's get this right. So if you had a Yuga Labs, if you had in this case, if you had the Coda NFT from other side, you could get you're basically getting a free mech, but you had to KYC for that. Yeah.
Right, okay. Anyway, tell us a bit more about the game and about the interview and what came out of that.
Yeah. So NWA Games, really well known. Been going for 10 years. But all their games have been real-time multiplayer fighting games. That's exactly what they do. They're one of the best game developers in the world about that stuff. They're really well known best known for a Power Rangers mobile game, which may seem a little bit weird, but that was a massive, it's a big surprise hit. It's done 90 million downloads. They've worked on stuff with WWE and branded stuff as well. So they know what they're doing when it comes to games. This game is exactly in the they made they made half a dozen games in this genre. So the NFT stuff comes as currently what's out are some boxes. So you need to build a mech. You need 10 parts. So there are founders boxes which have 10 random parts in them, and then there are some booster boxes with 5 parts that you can sort of obviously mix up. So basically, you get your parts, you build. If you only have 10 parts, then that's the mech you build. If you have more parts, you can sort of customize your mech and sort of choose, and that could be customizing on aesthetic grounds, but probably most people will customize on how they want their mech to fight. So obviously,
you buy a package, you don't know what parts you're going to get.
So the boxes are controlled by rarity. So obviously, if you get a common box, then you're going to get all the parts will be common. If you get an uncommon box, some will be uncommon, some will be common. Usual rarity sort of stuff going on there. And then you build your mech. So there's an energy system. So it's sort of how much energy. It's not just necessarily you got a massive punch. It's how much energy that punch uses. And there's sort of things like obviously you can build a big tank that's really strong but doesn't have much firepower. You can build a really sort of a more ranged character that is really strong attack but sort of weak defense, but sort of leaps around, so it's hard to hit. And there's things like sort of tractor beam, so you can pull the enemy towards you, and all. So I've not played the game yet. The game's live on the 14th, so we'll get an idea then what's going on. But for them, they're in the long term, we'll see. Everyone always says they want to be an esport. It's pretty hard to do, but they're backed by. I mean, they're owned by. So NWA is owned by Animoca Brands, and they've done this deal obviously with Yuga Labs. So they're well financed. So they're going to be running these tournaments. So the winners of the tournament's going to win, obviously NFTs. They're backed using ApeCoin. So that's the coin of the whole Yuga Labs metaverse. So that was what the mint was done in the first place, was ApeCoin. So they're sort of really well connected into that sort of high end NFT crypto blockchain gaming space. I'm pretty excited. I've got a box, so I'm looking forward to opening that. And then later, so next year, there'll be a free-to-play mobile version that will just go out through the app stores. No NFTs in there. People can just play the game. They'll get sort of the same mechs, but they won't be NFTs. Obviously, the point of that is to get people into the game and then sort of upsell them into the NFT side of things. But one of the cool things, whether it will work or not, I don't know, but it sounds pretty cool, that if you have an NFT mech, you can then basically it's not, minting is the wrong word. You can basically take a version of that and sell it to the free-to-play mobile people. So if you're in the free-to-play mobile game and you want to buy a mech, you won't be buying a mech that NWA have created. You'll be buying a mech that someone in the NFT game has created. And, and obviously, people can set the prices, and the KT, that's what everyone calls him, a TK even, sorry, TK, the CEO, was saying basically, 50% rev split, I guess, after the app store 30%. So you're basically getting whatever that is, sort of 40% of the revenue. And you can make as many, you can sell as many as you want. So it's sort of a little interesting sort of thing where you can imagine some YGG or some big guilds could be, or even any brand could be sort of building their own. If they buy the NFTs to make their things, they could be sort of selling them to other people. So I mean, it probably won't work for most people. Me making an NFT, probably not going to work. But
blockchain game with obvious.
Yeah, no, probably
Don't
not.
worry.
But you can sort of see, that like with a lot of this blockchain stuff, you can see the primitives there. The Lego pieces are there. Whether anyone uses them, that sort of depends a little bit on the product and how many people are using it and how exactly stuff works. But at some point one of these sort of open economies is going to really sort of.
And it will have an impact, whether it's not in the short term where we see this thing take off. Other projects will definitely take a lot of inspiration from this and build a lot from this. And maybe in 5 years' time, they might say, well, Wreak League did this 5 years ago, and that's what triggered us to try out this thing. So well, we're in it for the long run, aren't we? Right, let's crack on. There's loads of news and loads happening this week. You've been playing Shardbound.
Shardbound, yes.
Playtest, our game of the week. Can you
game
tell
of the week,
us
Shardbound?
about
Yes.
your experience?
So when was that? Goodness me. I think it was Tuesday, yeah. Yes, I had a playthrough with the Shardbound team, whose name I always get wrong because something Bazooka.
Bazooka Tango. Yeah.
Bazooka Tango, that wrong way around. Yeah. So Shardbound is a sort of hybrid deck building, tactical, sort of battling game. Was originally was sort of a game that was a Web 2 game that was developed and didn't quite get enough funding to get finished. It was sort of a Kickstarter project back in the day. So it's been sort of over. So the original developers doesn't really exist anymore. So Tango Bazooka have taken it over, and they are they've raised some money and they are deploying on Immutable. So they're one of sort of Immutable's high profile games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
PC game, maybe sort of plans in the medium term to put it on mobile, but at the moment like a PC game. Pretty solid actually. So this is the alpha playtest. Only 1,000 people are playing. Some placeholder art stuff, so it's not complete art, and obviously there's not sort of the big tutorial or these sort of daily quests or anything.
People can still register. Sorry, can people still register?
No, not anymore. No. It's for the next. So this runs until the 17th of September. It's a 10-day playtest. Just sort of bugs and that sort of stuff. But it was it's like any game with trading cards I find a little bit intimidating because there's always more. At the beginning, there's always loads of cards, and there needs to be loads of cards because if you're playing these games for years, you need the tactical depth to be able to go work out what cards you have and all that sort of stuff. But that can be a little bit intimidating in the beginning if there's no tutorial. But basically, it's a fairly simple game. So it's a head-to-head 2-player game, and you each have a sort of commander type character who's sort of has quite a lot of movement on the sort of hex board, and then you bring in up to 4 sort of units to sort of support that character, and there's other sort of cards, other sort of armor cards or sort of attribute cards you can play as well. So it runs off an energy system, like a mana system. So each card has a certain number of points before you can play it. Your points start with 1 point on the first round. It builds up. There's things you can do in the map to get more mana points, and basically 2 victory conditions. Either you just take down the enemy sort of commander, or there's these sort of they're called victory crystals that spawn on the map, and if you collect enough of those, you can win. So it's good in the sense that there's your commander can be not have a lot of health, but your sort of your victory condition is that you're going to collect all these victory points and win that way. So there's sort of different ways of playing, which you always want in this sort of game. So I've only played it a couple of times, so I wouldn't say I have any sort of great view on the strategic depth in the long term. But it was pretty nice experience. So.
Okay, so we're gonna round up now. The Korea Blockchain Week has been going on, and there's been some Web3 gaming events going on there, and alongside that, there's been some announcements. So the Web3 game publisher Planetarium that we mentioned earlier, that's developed 9 Chronicles. They announced that they are working on 2 more titles, 2 RPGs, which are called, what was it called? Verse 8 and Immortal Rising 2.
Yep.
And there will no doubt be more news coming out. Krafton, hang on, there was also that, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Krafton's announced its own blockchain called Settleless, which is a bit odd, but it's interesting in the sense that it's a blockchain, but it's designed to be a payment system. So it's using the stablecoin USDC. It's actually been developed using the Cosmos SDK in conjunction with Circle, who are the company behind the USDC stablecoin. So sort of, I guess, a sort of a very specific blockchain that you're not, as far as I can tell, they're not minting NFTs on it or anything like that. They're just basically saying this is a way for us to send payment system, send payments around. So they've got this metaverse that's been in development for a while called Midgelo or something like that, Project Midgelo. So that's what they're sort of talking about. But obviously, everyone sort of jumped on the fact that Krafton is a big games company and best known for PUBG, the sort of first game to popularise Battle Royale. So they also run a lot of esports stuff. So obviously there's the thinking that they could be using this sort of almost behind the scenes. So people are playing esports tournaments or whatever. They logged in with their Krafton account or whatever, and in the background, if you win win $20 from some sort of tournament, that money will come. That money will move from Krafton to you using USDC. Quite how it come, whether you accept it in USDC or whether you want it cashed out to your bank account or something like that. I mean, that'll be in the settings, I suppose. But it's sort of interesting. I mean, I guess it's interesting. They could have just used something like Ethereum or Polygon, because obviously USDC pretty much runs on everything. Solana now as well. So it's interesting that they've wanted to go through the hassle of setting up their own blockchain to do that. Probably for a big company like Krafton, sort of makes sense if And even aside from Krafton, there was a thing this week from the head of crypto at Visa, who was talking about how Visa was now using USDC on Ethereum and Solana.
Yeah.
In part of it, very small amounts. I think it said tens of millions of dollars or something. But they're sort of building that into Visa's building that into their payment system because crypto's never shut over the weekend. There's the fees are whatever the gas fees are. Dollars. You can send $1 billion for $2 gas fee or whatever. Compared to although it's more interesting, I suppose, for small amounts you can send sort of small amounts of crypto. But anyway, let's not go into all that. But so I think a lot of news this week, and I think it sort of goes to show that the blockchain game sector isn't dead. There's actually quite a lot of stuff going on. It's not going to be like a massive boom. I don't think in the near future, but there just is a lot of building going on, and hopefully sort of sentiment is slowly improving.
Good. And on that note, we are going to say bye-bye. Sorry for the
that was long, wasn't it? Goodness.
Today.
Yeah.
Right, we'll see you all next week.
And if you've got a hat for Jenny to wear, you can get in touch because we're always looking for new hats.
Editor at blockchaingaming.biz if you want to get in touch and send us a hat. Right. Okay. See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.